Three major updates just dropped about the Blue Jays, and if you're following this team closely right now, every single piece of news matters because Toronto is operating with championship urgency. They came within 2 outs of winning it all, and everything they're doing this offseason reflects that desperation to get back and finish the job. Let's break down what just happened and why it all connects to the bigger picture. First, the Blue Jays just signed an 18-year-old Cuban right-hander named Sign Torres as an international free agent for $200,000. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like a huge splash compared to the Dylan Cease signing or the Kyle Tucker speculation. But this move matters more than you might realize, and it's part of a much larger strategy Toronto has been executing for years. Torres left Cuba in 2024 and has been developing at the Chiquimajas Academy in the Dominican Republic. His fastball already sits in the low 90s and touches 94. That's solid velocity for an 18-year-old, and more importantly, he's got a 3-pitch arsenal with a changeup and slider that Toronto believes they can develop into legitimate weapons. This isn't just throwing money at a random prospect. This is targeted scouting, identifying someone with real upside. What makes this signing particularly interesting is the pattern. Toronto has been aggressively pursuing Cuban pitching talent, and they've had success with it. Rafael Sanchez signed in May 2022, and he's already reached Double-A New Hampshire. Silvano Hevaria signed in 2024 at 22 years old, and he's already considered a top 20 prospect in the system. The Blue Jays clearly have a pipeline and development plan for these Cuban arms, and Torres is the latest addition. This whole thing was made possible by the Miles Straw trade back in January. Toronto took on Straw's contract specifically to acquire $2 million in international free agency bonus pool money for the 2025 season. Originally, that money was earmarked for Roki Sasaki, who everyone wanted and who ultimately signed with the Dodgers. But losing out on Sasaki doesn't mean that bonus pool money goes to waste. Instead, Toronto used it on Torres, and notably on South Korean righty Moon Jun, who signed for $1.5 million at the end of the regular season. With Torres signing for $200,000, Toronto has roughly $400,000 left in their bonus pool. That money doesn't carry over to next year, so they have until December 15th to use it before the 2026 period opens on January 15th. Don't be surprised if they sign another international prospect in the next week and a half, because leaving money on the table makes no sense. The future financial situation is worth noting too. Toronto will have $500,000 deducted from next year's signing bonus pool because of the Anthony Santander signing last season. Another $1 million gets deducted from their 2027 pool because of the Dylan Cease deal. Those penalties show you how aggressively they've been operating, prioritizing major league talent, even when it costs them internationally down the line. Now let's talk about the position player situation, because this is where things get really tense for Blue Jays fans. Kyle Tucker visited Toronto's facility in Florida this week. That visit alone sent shockwaves through the fan base because Tucker is the top position player available. Career .865 OPS, 147 home runs, and he's projected to get at least 10 years and $350 million, with some estimates reaching $400 million. ESPN's Jeff Passan reported that rival executives already see Toronto as the favorites for Tucker. That's not speculation or wishful thinking. That's people around baseball looking at the landscape and saying the Blue Jays are the most likely landing spot. But here's where it gets complicated, because Mark Feinsand recently suggested that Bichette is actually more likely to sign with Toronto than Tucker. Why would Bichette be more likely? Because there's less competition for him. Tucker has multiple big market teams circling, driving up the price and creating uncertainty. Bichette wants to stay in Toronto, has spent his entire career there, and the mutual interest is obvious. Plus, he's going to be significantly cheaper. Keegan Matheson suggested a 7-year, $182 million deal similar to what Willie Adams got from San Francisco would be appropriate, maybe stretching to $200 million. That's expensive, but it's not Kyle Tucker money. The financial reality is brutal. Toronto just gave Vladimir Guerrero Jr. 14 years and $500 million. Committing another $400 million to Tucker on top of that would create an unprecedented payroll situation. If they signed Tucker, they'd have 7 contracts on the books worth at least $16.5 million annually. That's a massive concentration of money in a handful of players, and it limits flexibility everywhere else. But Feinsand didn't rule out Toronto signing both Tucker and Bichette. He specifically said the Blue Jays have enough money to do it if ownership wants to. And that's the key phrase, if ownership wants to. This isn't about whether the money exists. It's about whether ownership is willing to push the payroll to absolutely unprecedented levels to capitalize on this championship window. The conventional wisdom says Bichette is more realistic. He's cheaper. There's less competition. He wants to be here. And the fit is obvious, even with questions about his defense at shortstop. Some people have floated moving him to second base, which could work, depending on how the rest of the roster shakes out. Tucker is the better all-around player, elite in every aspect of the game, but landing him requires outbidding multiple teams and committing financial resources that would make Toronto one of the highest spending teams in baseball. Winter meetings start Monday, and that's when everything accelerates. Right now, it's all positioning and quiet conversations. Once those meetings start, decisions get made fast, players sign, teams pivot, and the entire offseason landscape can shift in 48 hours. Toronto is right in the middle of it all, pursuing impact bats while also trying to figure out their own internal situation with Bichette. Now we have to talk about Anthony Santander, because this is the uncomfortable reality that every Blue Jays fan needs to confront. Last offseason, signing Santander felt like exactly what the team needed, a proven power bat, someone who could do damage in the middle of the lineup. Ross Atkins called it a great fit. 5 years, $92.5 million. Year one was an absolute disaster. Santander dealt with a left shoulder injury that cost him most of the season. He appeared in just 54 games. His numbers were horrific, hitting .175 with 6 home runs and 18 RBIs. The year before, he hit .235 with 44 homers and 102 RBIs. That's not a slight decline. That's falling off a cliff. Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic named Santander's contract the fourth worst in all of baseball. He wrote that Toronto made the World Series largely in spite of Santander's performance, not because of it. The risk profile was always there. Lifetime .305 on-base percentage, limited defensive value, but nobody expected it to go this badly this quickly. The deferred money in the contract makes it slightly easier to stomach for now, but those deferrals will hurt more later. Toronto is essentially stuck with this deal for 4 more years, hoping Santander can bounce back and provide something resembling value. If he can't, it's an albatross that limits what they can do elsewhere. The silver lining is that Toronto isn't letting one bad contract derail their entire approach. They're still aggressively pursuing talent. They signed Dylan Cease, they're chasing Kyle Tucker, or looking to bring back Bichette. Ownership and Mark Shapiro are giving every indication they're willing to push payroll even higher. The team has plus 1,600 odds to win the World Series, 7th best in baseball, which shows how much respect they've earned after that worst-to-first turnaround and near championship. What connects all three of these updates is urgency. Signing Torres shows they're still thinking long-term about building sustainable success through international talent. Pursuing Tucker or Bichette shows they're going all in right now to capitalize on this window. And the Santander situation is a reminder that not every move works out, but you can't let one failure paralyze you into inaction. Toronto has the money. They have the motivation. They have ownership willing to spend. The pieces are there for them to build something truly special, but it requires making the right decisions over the next few weeks. Winter meetings are going to define this offseason, and the Blue Jays are positioned to be right in the center of every major conversation. Whether they land Tucker, bring back Bichette, or somehow pull off both, this team is committed to winning now, and that's exactly the mentality you need when you were 2 outs away from everything.